Text: this story is not based on rumor or legend. The place you are about to hear about exists, and what was found there was officially documented. Victorio Peak is a mountain located within the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. For decades, access to it has been restricted by the U.S. government. Inside this mountain, according to military reports, sworn testimonies, and court records, large quantities of gold were discovered, not buried, not hidden underground by ancient hands, but stored inside natural and artificial chambers within the mountain itself. This was not folklore. According to documented accounts, individuals who entered Victorio Peak in the mid-20th century reported finding gold bars, coins, and artifacts stacked in organized chambers. Some of this gold was photographed. Text: some of it was removed. Much of it was never accounted for again. What followed was not celebration. It was silence. Before we continue, let me say this briefly. If you are interested in real, documented treasure stories, stories where evidence exists but access does not, consider subscribing to the channel. This project is still growing, and reaching the first 1,000 subscribers is an important milestone for me. Your support truly matters. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why Victorio Peak became untouchable, we first need to understand who found the gold, and why the discovery was never meant to become public. For most of its history, Victorio Peak was not our destination. Text: it was a feature of the landscape that few people paid attention to, a rocky rise in the New Mexico desert, surrounded by heat, distance, and emptiness. Long before any gold was reported inside the mountain, the area itself discouraged curiosity. The terrain was harsh, water was scarce, travel was difficult. According to historical land records and regional surveys, the region around the peak saw little permanent settlement. There were no towns built nearby, no trade routes passing close enough to matter. It was a place people passed by, if they passed it at all. That changed in the mid-20th century, when the surrounding desert became part of a military testing zone. Large areas were fenced off, monitored, and removed from civilian access. Text: at that point, the mountain stopped being simply remote. It became restricted. According to later testimony, this restriction played a crucial role in what followed. Access was limited. Movement was controlled. Activities inside the area were documented in ways civilian land never was. In other words, the mountain became observable, but not accessible. This created a strange condition. If something unusual was found there, it would not spread by rumor. It would move through official channels. And when the first reports of gold inside the mountain emerged, they did not come from prospectors or treasure hunters. They came from people who were already inside. The first known entry into Victorio Peak did not happen by accident. Text: according to sworn testimony and later court records, access to the interior of the mountain occurred through a concealed opening, not a mine shaft in the traditional sense, but a narrow passage leading inward. What was found inside did not resemble a natural cave. Witnesses described constructed chambers, reinforced corridors, and organized storage spaces carved into the rock. This was not a place shaped by erosion or chance. It was shaped deliberately. Inside these chambers, gold was reportedly stacked, not scattered. Bars were arranged in rows. Coins were stored in containers. Artifacts rested on shelves cut directly into the stone. According to the accounts, the gold was dry, protected, and preserved. Text: there were no signs of recent disturbance. No modern tools, no indications that the site had been actively used in decades. The scale was what shocked those who entered. This was not a single cache or a hidden stash. It was a systematic storage site. Some of the individuals involved reportedly removed small quantities of gold as proof of discovery. Photographs were taken. Samples were shown to others. These actions, meant to confirm the find, had the opposite effect. They drew attention. Once information began to circulate through military and administrative channels, access to the mountain changed. Areas were sealed. Permissions were revoked. Movement became restricted beyond what it had been before. The discovery did not lead to excavation. It led to control. Text from that point on. Victorio Peak was no longer just a mountain with an unusual interior. It became a location that could not be approached freely, and a discovery that could not be openly discussed. The discovery inside Victorio Peak did not remain a private claim for long. According to court transcripts, affidavits, and later investigative summaries, individuals connected to the initial entry formally reported what they had found. These were not casual statements. They were sworn testimonies given under oath, describing the interior chambers and the gold stored within them. What mattered was not only what was said, but how it was said. Descriptions were consistent. Details matched. Timelines aligned. Text. Some witnesses claimed to have provided physical evidence, small quantities of gold, photographs, and precise descriptions of the interior layout. According to legal filings, these materials were reviewed by officials rather than dismissed outright. At this stage, the story could have followed a familiar path: verification, excavation, public disclosure. Instead, the opposite happened. Access to Victorio Peak was tightened further. Requests to return to the site were denied. Communication slowed, then stopped. According to those involved, explanations were vague. Security concerns were cited. Jurisdictional issues were raised. Responsibility shifted between agencies. No formal denial of the gold was issued, but no permission to recover it was granted either. Text. The case entered a quiet administrative space where it could not move forward and could not be resolved. For the people who had reported the discovery, this was unexpected. They had not been told they were wrong. They had not been accused of fabrication. They were simply shut out. And from that moment on, the story of Victorio Peak changed. It stopped being about a discovery. It became about who controlled the truth of that discovery. After access to Victorio Peak was denied through administrative channels, those who claimed to have discovered the gold turned to the only remaining option. They went to court. Text. According to court records and legal summaries, multiple legal actions were filed over the years, seeking recognition of the discovery and the right to recover what had been found inside the mountain. These were not criminal cases. They were civil claims. At their core was a simple argument: gold had been discovered, evidence had been presented, and access was now being denied without a clear legal resolution. The courts listened. Testimony was heard. Affidavits were reviewed. Documents were entered into the record, but the courts faced a limitation that could not be argued away. Victorio Peak lay within an active military installation. This changed everything. According to legal analysis, civilian courts could not compel access to a restricted military zone if national security was cited. Text. Even when judges acknowledged the seriousness of the claims, They lacked the authority to override military control of the land. As a result, the cases stalled, not because the claims were disproven, not because the evidence was ruled invalid, but because the location itself was legally unreachable. The mountain became a boundary not just of rock, but of jurisdiction. Court decisions reflected this tension. They did not declare the gold imaginary. They did not rule conclusively on ownership. They simply recognized that the question could not be resolved under the circumstances. For the claimants, this was the most frustrating outcome possible. There was no verdict to appeal, no ruling to challenge, only a closed door, held by lore. Text. At that point, Victorio Peak ceased to be a legal problem that could be argued into submission. It became a permanent exception. One of the most persistent questions surrounding Victorio Peak is not whether gold was found there, but how it got there in the first place. According to sworn testimony, historical analysis, and investigative reports, the gold inside the mountain did not appear to be random or recently placed. Its arrangement suggested planning, transport, and long-term storage. This immediately raised another question: who had the means, and the reason, to move large quantities of gold into a remote mountain and secure it inside constructed chambers? Several explanations have been examined over the years. None are proven beyond doubt, but some are more grounded than others. Text. One possibility points to historic mining operations in the Southwest. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, significant amounts of gold were extracted in the region. Not all of it was officially documented. Remote terrain allowed material to move without detailed records. Another explanation focuses on private hoards accumulated during periods of instability. Gold has often been hidden during wars, economic crises, and transitions of power, not buried hastily, but stored carefully in locations difficult to access. Some researchers have also examined connections to cross-border movement of valuables during times when law enforcement was limited and geography offered protection through isolation. What makes Victorio Peak unusual is the scale implied by the testimonies. Text. This was not a small cache. It was not a single shipment. According to descriptions, the quantity of gold exceeded what one individual or small group would reasonably hide for personal use. The chambers suggested long-term storage, not concealment in panic. That points to organization, and organization implies purpose. Whatever the origin, the gold inside Victorio Peak appears to have been placed there deliberately, with the expectation that it would remain untouched until someone returned to claim it. That return never came, or if it did, it was never recorded. In the decades that followed the initial discovery and failed court cases, interest in Victorio Peak did not disappear. It changed form. Text. According to later investigative reporting and public records, journalists, researchers, and private individuals continued to pursue the story, not by trying to force entry, but by attempting to clarify what had already been documented. Requests were filed, freedom of information inquiries were submitted, archived records were re-examined. What emerged was not a clear explanation, but a pattern. Information existed, but it was fragmented. Some documents were released, others were withheld or heavily redacted. No single agency appeared to take full responsibility for the site. Control passed through layers of military administration, each pointing to security requirements and restricted access. Importantly, no official statement ever declared that the reports of gold were false. Text: there was no definitive denial. Instead, the position remained procedural, access was restricted, therefore verification was not possible. From a historical perspective, this is unusual. Most treasure claims eventually collapse under scrutiny or are disproven through investigation. Victorio Peak did neither. It remained in a suspended state, neither confirmed through excavation nor dismissed through evidence. According to analysts familiar with the case, this is what keeps the story alive. Not speculation, not imagination, but unresolved documentation. Even today, individuals who have attempted to reopen the case through legal or administrative channels encounter the same obstacle their predecessors faced decades earlier. The mountain itself is inaccessible. Text: and as long as that remains true, the gold inside Victorio Peak, whatever its true origin, remains beyond reach, not because it cannot be taken, but because no one is allowed to try. Most treasure stories eventually collapse into one of two categories. Either the treasure is found, or the evidence fails. Victorio Peak fits neither. According to historians and legal analysts who have examined the case, what makes Victorio Peak unique is not the claim itself, but the structure of the evidence around it. There are sworn testimonies. There are court records. There are documented attempts to gain access. This places the story in a rare position. It is not folklore passed through generations. It is not a single eyewitness account. It is not a rumor amplified by time. Text: instead, it is a documented discovery that was never allowed to be resolved. Another difference is control. Most lost treasure sites are inaccessible because of geography: oceans, jungles, deserts. Victorio Peak is inaccessible because of policy. The mountain is not lost. Its location is known. Its interior has been entered. What prevents resolution is not uncertainty, but authority. This creates a lasting tension. As long as the mountain remains closed, the question remains open. And because no definitive excavation has occurred, the story cannot be settled in either direction. According to observers, this makes Victorio Peak one of the few treasure cases where time does not weaken the claim. It preserves it. Documents do not fade. Court records do not erode. Testimony remains on file. Text: the mountain stays silent, but the record does not. Today, the gold of Victorio Peak is no longer just a potential treasure. It has become a precedent. According to legal scholars and historians, the case represents a rare intersection of discovery, documentation, and permanent restriction. It shows how something tangible can exist within the historical record and still remain unreachable in practice. In most treasure stories, time erodes belief. Here, time preserves it. Every year that passes without excavation does not disprove the claim. It simply reinforces the condition that made it unresolved in the first place: controlled access. This has shifted how the story is understood. Victorio Peak is no longer primarily about wealth. It is about boundaries. Text: boundaries between private discovery and public authority, between documentation and verification, between what is known and what is permitted to be known. For researchers, the case highlights a limitation of historical inquiry. Evidence can exist, testimony can be sworn, and legal processes can be followed, yet resolution can still be denied. For the public, it creates a different kind of fascination, not the excitement of discovery, but the tension of permanence. The gold inside Victorio Peak may still be there, or it may not. What matters is that the question cannot be answered, not because it is unclear, but because the answer is inaccessible. That distinction is what keeps the story alive. Victorio Peak has never changed its position. Text it still rises from the New Mexico desert in the same place it always has. Its slopes are visible. Its outline is familiar. Nothing about it suggests secrecy or importance at first glance. And yet, it remains closed. According to public records, the mountain has never been officially excavated in response to the claims made about its interior. No comprehensive survey has been conducted. No final report has been released. There has been no announcement that the gold was removed, and no statement that it never existed. The mountain simply remains inaccessible. This creates a rare condition in historical storytelling. The evidence is not missing. The witnesses are not imaginary. The documentation has not disappeared. Only access has been denied. Text Victorio Peak does not invite interpretation through imagination. It resists it through silence. It stands as a physical reminder that some answers are not lost to time. They are withheld by circumstance. The gold, if it is still there, has not been reclaimed by nature. It has not been scattered or destroyed. It has simply been left alone. Victorio Peak is not the story of a treasure that vanished. It is the story of a treasure that may still exist, untouched, unverified, and unresolved. Unlike shipwrecks swallowed by the ocean, this gold lies within reach of the surface. Its location is known. Its discovery is documented. What separates Victorio Peak from other treasure stories is not mystery, but restraint. The mountain is not silent because nothing is inside it. Text it is silent because no one is allowed to speak for it. If you appreciate calm, documented stories about real treasures and the decisions that keep them hidden, consider subscribing to the channel. This project is still growing, and reaching the first 1,000 subscribers is an important milestone for me. Your support truly matters. And before you go, consider this question: when something valuable is proven to exist but cannot be accessed, does it belong to history or to silence?